From the studios of ABC News, it's time to dig deep with Bob and Alice's weekly archaeological podcast.
Okay, picture this. It's the summer solstice dawn, sun just peeking up, and you're standing among the crowds at Stonehenge, watching that iconic light hit the heel stone.
Right.
It feels ancient, perfectly aligned, like this is exactly what it was built for, right? We all carry that powerful image.
Yeah, it's very familiar.
And you're here because you want to dive deeper than the surface.
Yeah.
Cut through, all the noise and find those surprising aha moments, even about things you thought you knew well.
Absolutely. And today, we're going to take a deep dive into a really interesting piece of source material that directly challenges that familiar Stonehenge image.
Exactly. Our source today is a blog post. It's titled Stonehenge Hoax Summer Solstice from the website prehistoric-britain.co.uk. And it presents a pretty bold alternative perspective, making some, significant claims about Stonehenge's purpose and critically when its main structure was actually built.
So our mission is basically to unpack this specific source, understand its core arguments, particularly its take on that summer solstice alignment and the dating of the big sarsen stone phase, and see how it stacks up against the common understanding.
Let's start right there then with the common perception that the main purpose of Stonehenge, as we see it today, was fundamentally built for that summer solstice sunrise, with the sun rising precisely over the heel stone.
Right. And the source we're looking at identifies what its author calls the problem with this picture.
Okay.
They point out that if you look closely, the heel stone isn't perfectly centered on the avenue leading away from the monument, and it even appears to be tilted.
Tilted.
Yeah. This observation leads the author to question whether the monument, in its current form, was originally intended for that specific heel stone alignment. They suggest perhaps the stone was tilted later or maybe during subsequent restorations.
Okay, so the source is immediately saying, hold on, the classic alignment might not be the original intent. And this connects to their argument that Stonehenge's purpose actually shifted dramatically over thousands of years.
That's a key part of their case, yeah. The source suggests that Phase I, the earlier stage primarily involving the smaller blue stones brought from Wales,
Right, the blue stones.
might have been oriented differently. They propose a northwest orientation, possibly linked to the midwinter moonset, which, some ancient cultures associated with the dead and the afterlife.
Interesting.
The author even mentions a potential mooring station for the blue stones near where the old car park used to be, hinting at how they might have arrived.
Fascinating, a connection to the moon and the dead in the earliest phase. So what changes according to this source?
Well, the source argues that after an incredibly long period, we're talking around 4,000 years, which is just a huge span of time.
Wow.
Roughly equivalent to the entire history, from the Bronze Age to now the monument's role transformed. They link this shift to broader changes in burial practices seen in the landscape.
Okay, like moving away from older communal burials and long barrows.
Exactly, towards later individual cremations found in round barrows.
Right.
The author speculates that the purpose shifted from something like curing the sick and implied original use towards a focus on celebrating life and rebirth, symbolized by the sun.
So the sun focus came later.
This, they contend, is why the later Phase II, when the massive sarsen stones were erected, oriented the avenue towards the summer sunrise.
That proposed shift in purpose is quite a narrative. And if the Phase II builders did orient the avenue towards the summer sunrise, the source argues the most logical alignment would have been straight down the middle of that avenue, correct?
Exactly. The source is very clear on this, stating that aligning down the center is the most sensible.
Okay.
And this is where the author introduces another point. They claim that archaeologists have only partially investigated this central avenue alignment.
Really? Only partially?
Because of this, the author argues, the true construction date of the sarsen stone phase, Phase II, it remains unresolved by conventional archaeological methods, in their view anyway.
And this opens the door for the source to propose its own dating method, using something called Earth's axial precession. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's unpack precession. The source describes it as a tiny, slow wobble in the Earth's axis, kind of like a slightly off-center spinning top. This wobble is incredibly small, causing the position of sunrise and sunset on the horizon to shift by a minuscule 0.00002 degrees each year.
Tiny.
But you're right. The key is that over thousands of years, this tiny shift adds up significantly. The source notes that over 10,000 years, the shift is a noticeable 2 degrees.
2 degrees. Think about that. That's equivalent to the width of 4 moons or suns side by side on the horizon.
Precisely. It becomes quite significant over millennia.
So this tiny annual wobble creates a predictable shift over vast amounts of time.
Oh.
How does the source use this effect, this precession, to date the center of the avenue?
This is where the source uses measurements like those you could get from tools like Google Earth, as they describe it. They first take the current accepted measurement for the summer solstice sunrise over the heel stone today,
Right.
which they state is 50.81 degrees.
Right, the angle for the heel stone alignment now.
Then they measure the angle straight down the center of the avenue leading away from the monument, getting a reading of 49.57 degrees.
Okay, so the source identifies a difference between the current heel stone alignment, 50.81, and the straight down the middle of the avenue alignment, 49.57. That difference is 1.24 degrees.
Precisely. And this 1.24 degree difference is what the source sees as the key physical manifestation of the shift over time. This is where they sort of reverse engineer their date.
Wow.
They divide that measured difference, 1.24 degrees, by the known annual shift rate caused by precession, 0.00002 degrees per year.
So 1.24 divided by 0.00002, that equals 6,200.
Which gives them approximately 6,200 years. Based on this calculation, the source proposes that the avenue, and by extension the Phase 2 sarsen structure oriented to it, was constructed around 6,200 years before today.
Wow.
This leads them to propose a construction date of approximately 480 BCE. The author explicitly states this is thousands of years earlier than the archaeologists have told the public for the sarsen phase.
That is a massive difference from the more commonly accepted dates for the main stone structure, which are often cited closer to, what, 2,500 BCE?
Exactly. A huge difference.
And the source brings in a piece of physical evidence to support this much earlier date, an antler bone.
Ah, yes. This antler bone is a critical part of the author's case presented in the source. They specify that this particular antler was found in the packing material, basically, the fill used to support the massive stones for Sarsen Stone 27. They even provide its archaeological ID, Oxe 49U2.
Found deliberately placed under a 12-ton stone. That sounds, well, pretty significant for the author's argument.
Well, the source provides the radiocarbon dating for this antler bone, a range of 342 to 4039 BCE, or more specifically, 4191 BCE plus or minus 152 years.
Wow. 4191 BCE, give or take a bit. And the source's calculation based on the avenue alignment and precession came up with 4180 BCE.
Yeah.
The source points out that those dates are remarkably close.
The author of the source certainly highlights that close proximity as compelling support for their theory, and they use it to challenge the conventional archaeological explanation.
Which might be what? That it was just lying around.
Right, which might suggest the antler was accidentally there or maybe from nearby activity, unrelated. The author argues that if the antler was indeed 1,700 years old.
Right, the gap between their date and the conventional one.
At the time Phase 2 was supposedly built, it would have likely rotted and decomposed, especially after being under a 12-ton stone for millennia.
Good point.
Therefore, they conclude that its presence under the stone, coupled with a radiocarbon date that aligns so closely with their precession calculation, around 4185 BCE, strongly supports their argument for a much earlier construction date for the Sarsen phase.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you try to get a well-rounded view?
Well, I think this deep dive into this specific source material really shows us that even for something as iconic and seemingly well understood as Stonehenge, the story isn't necessarily settled.
Definitely not.
This source presents a compelling argument that challenges the familiar image of the solstice crowds perfectly aligned with the heel stone as the original intent of the main structure. It introduces an alternative narrative of a shifting purpose over millennia, proposes a different original alignment based on the avenue center, offers a specific dating method using astronomical precession that points to a construction thousands of years earlier than commonly accepted.
And ties it all together with intriguing evidence, like that dated antler bone found under a massive stone.
Exactly. It's a powerful case presented in this source, offering a completely different lens through which to view a place many of us thought we knew.
The blog post, Stonehenge Hoax Summer Solstice, and the wider work by Robert John Langdon on the prehistoric-britain.co.uk website are certainly there for you if you want to explore these specific arguments further.
Yeah, for anyone wanting to dig deeper into his specific claims.
And here's something to consider, maybe chew on. Given that a relatively small measurement difference, like that 1.24 degrees, the source highlights between the heel stone and the avenue center, and a single object found in the ground, like that antler bone dated under stone 27,
Mm-hmm.
can be used by an author to construct a theory that radically changes our understanding of when and potentially why a monument like Stonehenge was built. Well, what other aspects of history might look completely different if we started questioning seemingly settled details and look for alternative interpretations of the evidence?
That's a great question. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Something to think about indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.